test on one day. India, England, Australia. Waadaplaya.
Right. Win the toss and win the match was the mantra this series between England and India. England won 3 out of 4 tosses. Australia, for a change, was rooting for England most of the series. Mike Atherton called this as a lengthy test series, can be like an arm wrestle. Michael Vaughan can now focus on Meghan Markle and Harry interviews instead of pitch reports as India make to the World Test Championship finals. Welcome back, everyone. India versus England Test Series review on our concussion sub series, and we have 2 gorillas with us today. Welcome, Nakul and Tony. Great to have you guys back.
Thank you, Suman. Great to be back.
Delighted, Suman.
Excellent, excellent. And of course, we have 2 concussion subs, Akash and Sanjay, with us today. Great. So before we look at dissecting the series, shall we rewind to a preview which we did with Gorillas back in January? So let's listen into what the predictions were. Going around the table, Bear, predictions for Test series?
Well, having talked up England, I'm really quite pessimistic about the results. I think we might get a draw in one. I'd like to think it would be 2-1 to India, but I've got a funny feeling it'll be 3-0 to India.
Tony?
I'm going out on a limb and saying I think it's going to be 1-1 with a couple of draws. I'm looking at Ahmedabad is over the years has got slower, more batsman friendly. If England can bat long, I fancy them to steal a couple of draws and 1 win. I think that's as good as it's going to get, but I'd be more than happy I'd be happy to be right if my 1-1 proved to be so. I can tell you.
Nakul?
I should just say, by the way, that I am of Indian descent, but I'm certainly not an India fan. One of the things that I've found over commentary is that I actually care less and less about who wins and more about the game, and I find I enjoy cricket more that way. That third test is an interesting one because it's the day-night test with a pink ball. It's going to be interesting. It actually probably brings both teams' bowlers into the game. As much as no one will fancy facing Bumrah, Ishant, and Shami, but no one will fancy facing Archer, Broad, and Anderson and Wokes with a pink ball either. So it's going to be fascinating on a pitch that essentially is a completely new surface. India have lost 1 home test since England last won in India in 2012. I think it's a phenomenally difficult challenge for England. As Bear said, there's a lot of very good cricket, I think, that's going to be played in this series. It could well be, my suspicion is, it'll be like when the reverse of when India toured in 2018. Lots of competitive test matches, but a quite one-sided final result. And I'm also going 3-0.
What about you guys? What do you reckon?
I think it will be 2-1. 1 will be draw, 2 for India. I think it will be 2-1 for my end.
That, by the way, wouldn't guarantee India qualification for the World Test Championship final. They need to win by 2 clear tests.
Correct. So that's why I said a lot at stake. So because England are fresh off 2-0 hammering, they have good practice on the subcontinental wickets, I wothink, and rotation of players might work out their way. They definitely are going to give run for the money for India.
Definitely win the series, but I think England might win the pink ball test match because.
So you're going 3-1 India.
Wow, that was amazing. Sanjay is the only one who got 3-1. What do you guys think of prediction?
Yeah, but look at where he said that England to get their 1.
Yeah, well, we all read the pink ball test wrong, didn't we? We all thought that it was going to be the seamers coming to the fore and the ball moving under the lights and Anderson and Bumrah and all this. The seamers were complete bystanders in that test match on both sides, weren't they? I predicted 3-0. Really not sure where the draw was going to be coming from. I didn't expect England to win a test in this series. They played phenomenally well in that first test match. It was a near perfect performance in that first test match to win it with bat and ball, set up by that magnificent innings by Joe Root and then capped with that equally magnificent spell from James Anderson on the last day. I think the slight disappointment from England is how quickly their plans fell apart, and those plans which they had in place through 2 successive series against Sri Lanka and then that first test match. 1 bad innings, it seems, in the second test in Chennai, and they reverted back to the bad old habits against spin. The series was not as competitive as I had hoped it would be.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think the 2018 series was much more competitive, although it was 4-1 series line is pretty poor. But what do you think, Tony? Was the series really competitive at all? Was it boring? What went wrong for England?
No, I don't think you could ever accuse it of being boring. I think England slightly chased their tails. They were guilty a bit of picking teams for the game that had just gone rather than the next game. I think they were very preset in their plans for that pink ball test. Didn't work out. They were always gonna field the team that they did. I think, but for entertainment wise, it was gripping, albeit from an English perspective, occasionally, from behind the sofa. But nonetheless, it was kind of curiously watchable. I think the thing you've got to hang on to as a World and England follower is you can look at that fourth test and you can say there was a moment when, okay, 205, even Ben Stokes said that's under par. He was thinking 300 wicket. He was right. But there was a point at which I think India were 120 for 5. England were on top. Wickets had come in a couple of clusters, and suddenly their tails were up. And that could have been a series-defining moment. The fact is, where India scored is they had the standout players who stood out at exactly the right times. Rishabh Pant, doesn't matter who you support, was just, box office to watch. And he and it was Sundar and
Akshar.
Patel as well, but popped in a few, didn't he? But a part of that stand, I think. That they won that big moment. In another match, I think Rohit Sharma put 161 on the board, and it was the standout innings. So if England want to cling on to something, they could potentially cling on to the fact that there was a point in the fourth test where they could just have hauled it back to 2-2, and it got away from them through an absolutely world-class performance. Fantastic to watch. I wouldn't want it to be an England bowler, but there's that lovely picture, wasn't there, of Jimmy Anderson shrugging his shoulders and going, well, I've just bowled probably the best ball I can bowl, and he's, I don't know, done a somersault and triple salco and whipped it over the back of his ankle, and all of a sudden it's gone for 6. It was just nuts. It was just nuts, and it was, much as Ben Stokes in a way, Australia are going to will look back at Headingley in that Ashes test, and they'll go, well, how on earth did that happen? I think England might feel a little bit like that about the blitzkrieg that was Rishabh Pant. But yeah, at the end, to summarise it, I think generally India won the big moments when they needed to. Bar that first test, England did play very well in that first test. 2 quality spinners against 1 very good spinner. I think Jack Leach more than held his end up. How England would have done better if only they'd had a spin pair they could rely on to operate in tandem. That was another big difference between the teams. I felt desperately sorry for Dom Bess. He 1 over, I recall him bowling was I think he bowled, the first one was a no ball, the second one, 2 rank long hops, and then an absolute sizzler that went past the outside edge. They're saying it'll be a tough road back for him, but he just needs to learn control. Easier said than done, and he doesn't get to play on the same wickets that Axar Patel and our Ashwin do on a regular enough basis. We're not going to make the jokes about Taunton. Yeah, big moments. Big players at big moments making a big difference. England could have sneaked something, but for that, even right up to the fourth test.
I think your point, Tony's point about preparing for the previous crisis, I think is absolutely right. They picked that fourth test team based on what had happened the previous test, where they went in with an extra batter and a bowler light. They did phenomenally well to stay in that test match as long as they did, with effectively 3 bowlers. I felt really sorry for Dom Bess, and it was quite hard to watch at points. Watching someone struggling for their technique that much at the top level, it's very difficult to watch. As a spinner at a very low level, I have been there. I've had the yips in a match, and it's horrible. Those people who were really piling on him, I think, have got to look at themselves and think, have a little bit of sympathy there. That said, it is a test match, and the management of him throughout the series wasn't great. any more than it was of Moeen Ali. But England, they ended up with a bowler light as a result, and Stokes and Leach and Anderson did phenomenally well to keep England in that game. They were superb for the first 2 sessions on day one. Really, really good. Stokes bowling those incredibly long spells, Anderson giving nothing away. I think he went for 14 runs off his first 17 overs or something ridiculous like that. Jack Leach was very difficult to get away. But the minute they tired, left that little bit of a gap ajar, and Rishabh Pant just stormed through it with Washington Sundar following. And you can't go into a test match with that. Dan Lawrence actually did pretty well in both innings, didn't make much of a difference because by the time he came in, it was too late. I don't really necessarily have a problem with them picking the side they did for the pink ball test, given how little we knew about the Ahmedabad pitch, which was nothing. First time there'd been a pink ball on a dryish track. Nobody really knew what that pitch was going to do, and a lot of people said, India went in with 3 spinners. They didn't. They went in with 2 spinners and Washington Sundar, who was essentially a batter batting at 8. I think I was a little bit disappointed from the point of view of a cricket watcher that we didn't see more of the very good seam attacks on both sides. Particularly, India's seam attack has been brilliant at home for the last several years. They've taken their wickets at a better economy rate and a better average. And what would be a little worrying for England and encouraging for India is how they won this series 3-1 with only really, Tony's basically named the players who stood up and performed to potential there. Rohit Sharma, R. Ashwin, Washington Sundar, and Akshar Patel. Really, the seamers weren't needed for much of the series. Shubman Gill faded after a good start to the series, and the middle order were only good in patches. I think it does show the strength of this Indian team at home. It's now, 12 series wins on the bounce at home. 28 wins from the last 36 home tests. Ridiculous record. So it's a curious one that England actually have done well to win a test match, but also will be very disappointed in the manner in which they played through the series. So it's a tough one to judge, really.
I don't think any Guerillas are hiding behind the pitch at the end of the day. Both teams have to play on it. There was one pitch that was distinctly lively. The fourth test match pitch was okay it was what you might expect, I suspect, in India. So, India went into that third test thinking it's all about seam, and it wasn't. So I think the disappointing factor, if you look at Chennai, we got 9 days cricket out of 10. Whereas if you look at Ahmedabad, we got 5 days cricket out of 10. Now, that may be not so much of an issue for Star or whoever in India, but in England, it was a pretty big deal that the cricket was on free-to-air TV for the first time since 2005, the Ashes. I'm putting on Channel 4 one morning, wanting to see cricket, and I've got an old copy of Great British Bake Off or something. I'm thinking, oh Jesus, So the genuine fact is, cricket possibly, whilst it was extraordinarily watchable, it really was. I think potentially cricket was the loser, and I don't think the BCCI is going to want too many series that they only get half the amount of cricket that it cannot be good for the global game. And I'm sure Channel 4 will be looking at that going, did we get, I don't know what they paid for it in the end. I'm sure Nakul probably does, but did they get value for that? They will think ultimately not. And that cannot be good for the game. And I think that would be one of my, more than England losing, much more than England losing, that was more my disappointment. If we were sat here and England had lost 4-0 and we'd had, 5 falls are 20, and we'd had 18 or 19 days of great cricket, I think I'd have gone, it's fantastic. Well done, India. And I'd probably make the same points about the Test cricket as a brand, which is a global brand. And India, as arguably its most powerful participant, has a kind of duty of care to try not to let that happen. Now, they can't be accountable for a degree of rabbit in headlights ineptitude of their opposition.
And we've kind of already seen that. There's already been some talk of what sort of pitches India will produce for day-night tests and whether they'll have that sort of perfect storm of the pink ball with all that lacquer skidding on and the dusty pitch and all of this stuff. It was, there was so many sort of unknown and unknowable factors. Plus, as Virat Kohli, I think, pointed out, both sides batting badly and reacting badly to those sets of unknown conditions.
Well, he pointed out
plus some very good bowling.
He said both sides had an issue sufficiently defensive,
or defending correctly,
or defending against in very difficult circumstances. Undoubtedly,
yeah. Both sides sort of got suckered into playing for turn that wasn't there repeatedly, even after being shown that the dangerous ball was the one that was going straight on, and really with a couple of exceptions, I think maybe Rohit and Zach Crawley, I think on both sides, sort of batted quite well. The rest, it was a freak of a test match. It was, I mean, tests where wickets are falling all the time are very exciting, but it gets a bit hard to breathe at times. It was quite hard to work out what was going on through most of that test match. It's the shortest test match in terms of balls since I think 1936. Or 1935, I think. So it's a long, we've got to be careful about making too many judgments based on a historical freak like that. But we've already seen that there's been some sense of, that was probably a bit much. And I didn't think the pitch was unfit for Test cricket or unfair or anything, but it took too many players out of the game.
Yeah, that's a great point. It did take the players out of the game, which is unfortunate. And Tony, if it makes you feel any better about games not being on telly, Sanjay took a day off on day 3 of the third test match, and he had nothing to do. He watched PSL.
That was the same for all of us. He could have, if it wasn't for the pandemic, he could have come around and watched the Great British Bake Off rerun with me.
Yeah, it's disappointing because most of the weekends you did not have any cricket because matches were going, getting over in super quick time. So it was disappointing.
And funnily, Sanjay has taken a leap on the first T20I as well. Let's hope that it's not a shortened affair of a shortened game.
It's definitely not going to get rained off in Ahmedabad.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure Johnny Bairstow's, looking out of his hotel window now and thinking, oh, good, look, I had such a good time there last time. Can't wait for the T20s to start. I'll give you one thing to hang on to, actually, for the World Test Series final, which there is a chance it's going to be in Southampton.
Well, I think that's now confirmed.
Oh, it's confirmed. Okay. So the groundsman at Southampton used to be the groundsman at Somerset, which was the pitch that everybody cites as being, occasionally when Somerset needed county championship points, all of a sudden it would be a viper's nest of spitting cobras spinning all over the place. And he's now at Hampshire. So, I'm sure. I wonder if the BCCI's got his number.
more generally, the Hampshire pitch is probably the most spin-friendly of the test venues in England. Tends to be a fairly placid pitch, massive outfield, which I think helps the spin bowlers. I would expect it'll be a fairly quote-unquote normal and quite neutral test pitch, a little on the slow side, maybe. It's going to be that India and New Zealand going up against each other in England with their strength of their bowling attacks. It's going to be fantastic.
I think it's brilliant. I'm looking forward to it as a neutral, hugely.
Moeen Ali got a lot of wickets, I think, in 2014, if I remember.
He loves bowling there. He did very well again. He out-bowled Ashwin there in 2018, bowled beautifully.
So guys, let's keep aside the quality of spinners and pitch aside for a moment, and just let's think about this England's rotation policy. I've just read about it recently. Silverwood mentioning that they'll carry on with the rotation policy irrespective of the thing, until the fire bubble rule, is going on. Do you guys agree with it? Is it helping or is it actually affecting the team?
I understand the motivation for it. It's compromise. My reluctance to buy into it is kind of partly created by, I think, a degree of transparency that in a T20 World Cup year, they're clearly giving the white ball team first priority, even though they will swear till they're blue in the face that that's not necessarily the case. I think it did rather compromise us. Moeen Ali could have been that second spinner that if India were at 120 for 5, 121 for 5, whatever it was, the game may not have run away from England and we might be sat here talking about a drawn series. Admittedly, without any draws in, I really have no clue what I was smoking when I thought there might be 2 of them, but that's a different story. I understand the principle of it. I understand bubble life being hugely difficult. I think ultimately did cost England. The white ball series is going to be interesting because quite clearly there was a degree of making sure players are fit for that. Some of the players who were rested are not going to be rested as they go off to play in the IPL. I think you just have to embrace that and accept that in a way it makes you better players and more versatile players and more adept in Indian conditions as a result of playing in it. So I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. And the fact it's also an Ashes year is a little bit of a confusion in that picture.
And it is a new concept, right? I think thinking from completely opposite direction. It's a new concept, tried very first time. So there are bound to be reactions. There are bound to be we getting it wrong. And I think as time goes by, 2, 3, 4 more series, probably the rotation policy is the best thing which can happen to cricketers. Who knows? That's my perspective.
It's a pretty unique set of circumstances. Not only the pandemic, but the ridiculous amount of cricket that England have been scheduled to play this year. 17 test matches, which I think is more than... I think only one team has ever played more test matches in a year than that. Plus a T20 World Cup, plus a bunch of white ball series in various different parts of the world, with COVID thrown in. I think it would be... I'm all for the policy, and in the fact that they've been very clear with the players ahead of time. You're getting this, you're getting this. Players, big groups of players aren't all going at the same time. And it used to be the case that England would sort of rotate, but they wouldn't care about white ball cricket at all. And so you'd basically get whoever was left playing the white ball series. And that's how it got to that nadir of the 2015 World Cup that Morgan had to pick the team up from. And now that isn't the case. In terms of prioritising white ball cricket, this is likely to be the only T20 series in this cycle that Owen Morgan will have the full-strength T20 team available. That's not going to be the case this summer when England are playing the Test series against India. And in New Zealand, that's not going to be the case because there are going to be players like Stokes and Archer and Butler who are going to, and possibly Sam Curran, who are going to be probably in the Test setup rather than the white ball setup, and they cannot be in both. Last summer we had separate bubbles. Red and white ball, and it's quite likely that a lot of those multi-format players will be playing the Test series. We don't know this, obviously, and so there was a ODI against Ireland last year where James Vince came on second change for England. The Ashes is such a long way off; it's almost not worth bothering about right now. There's so much cricket between now and then. All sorts of things could happen. Incidentally, by the way, Australia have completely the opposite problem, where they aren't playing a Test match between now and those Ashes. So it's interesting how even two members of the quote-unquote Big Three have completely different sets of circumstances. I think the public handling of Moeen Ali and Dom Bess has been poor. I think Ed Smith asking Moeen Ali to stay on after he's being presented with a certain set of circumstances was poor. I think that was an overreach by Ed Smith and shouldn't have happened, and didn't help Dom Bess either. No. I don't also think that Dom Bess should necessarily have been criticised in public the way he was. I don't really see what the need for that was. If you want to have conversations with him about where he needs to improve, that's fine. That is your role as a coaching team, but I don't think we need to know that necessarily as in the public domain. And I think it ended up with both spinners feeling a bit underconfident and put even more work on Jack Leach and the seamers. But I think the only way of managing this group of players and making sure that they get breaks before they break down, before it becomes a problem. And Ed Smith has talked very well, actually, about the desire is to give players a rest before they need one, before it becomes a crisis point. And I think that was the only sensible way of managing the group. So we are in a unique set of circumstances, Suman, you're right. Well, this might not be the case once COVID clears. We might not have the situation again, but England and India have a player pool that they can do this. Football has been a squad game for years. Cricket is, as you rightly say, catching up to that concept. So the communication of it with the public, I think, will take more time, and it will take people getting used to it. But I'm very much supportive of the policy. Talking
of the spinners, Nakul and Tony, I think the only way the England guys would have won is if they had Swan and Monty in their side. What's with the quality of the spinners we have, or is it just not giving enough confidence to the people, or is there no bench strength around it? What do you think is the reason?
I mean, that Swan Panesar series was a bit of a freak, having two quality spinners at their peak at the same time when India's spinners were either, in Harbhajan's case, coming towards the end of their career, in Pragyan Oja's case, kind of plateauing, and Ashwin not quite at the level he needed to be, plus Kevin Peterson and Alistair Cook in the form of their life. There is a reason that India have not lost a series since, and had barely lost a series in the 8 years before that. I think it was 8 years before that. I think to that 2004.
Yeah,
Wasn't it, at home?
2004. Yeah.
There's a reason for that. But I think there's been a little bit of unnecessary hand-wringing about the state of Indian English spin. It's probably never been the case that England have had 4 or 5 or whatever good spinners to pick from at the same time. That isn't how it goes, in the same way that it's taken until now for India to have a lot of good seam bowlers all at once.
2 would be nice, though.
Sure, I think
4 or 5.
Jack Leach and Moeen Ali at their best are good international wicket takers, and Moeen Ali has proved this over his career. You know, there are some promising. I like Amo Virdi, who's coming through quite a lot. I've seen him bowl a little bit at Surrey, and I've liked what I've seen. And you know, he's very young, and he'll develop. Dom Bess is still 23. He will develop. You know, give him a few years as Yorkshire's first choice spinner. You know, people forget that Graham Swan was 28 when he came back into that England team, and kind of at his best after a few years. Spin bowling's hard, even on pitches that do offer you assistance. It's hard, and it's very hard when you're going up against good players of spin. And
what I'd have liked to have seen.
It's an art that needs patience.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the world of hypothesis, but you know, England have never been ashamed of borrowing a South African to play. Simon Harmer, the thought of Simon Harmer bowling in tandem with Jack Leach. Now that might have been interesting. You know, thank you, Brexit. It's never going to happen now. But the fact is, and he's not a spring chicken, is he? What is he? Early 30s now, I think. Yeah. Well, so he's a young lad by my standards, but he's an older statesman by cricket standards. But you know, there is, and he plays on an English wicket at Chelmsford, which is more likely to help a spinner. It's not Ahmedabad by any manner of means, but it's more likely to help a spinner. And I think, you know, a lot of people made the point that we get very upset in England if we turn up to play on turning tracks, but we seem to accept green seamers that where the ball is hooping round corners on, you know, because it's swinging in the air or nibbling or, you know, full on biting like a shark off the pitch. That's okay. But as soon as we see a bit of spin, we go, ooh, foul play. Shoot to the groundsman, you know.
And then we end up making jokes
and we
about
do have to
Taunton
change our attitude a bit on that, which means we have to think about when we play our longer form cricket.
Yeah, I mean, there is this slight. I don't know if other countries do this actually. After losing an away tour, is that everyone starts talking about massively restructuring domestic cricket, which I think is I don't know if that's a peculiarly English disease, but I'm not. I wonder, does the Indian media do that? I mean, you know, when India lost those series in England and Australia in 2011 and 14.
They don't go back to the domestic structure, but they go back to the selectors here.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, let's ignore the fact that you had some really good players playing really badly through most of those series. Okay. I know. Yeah. There is a little bit.
I don't think I'm saying we change it completely. I'm not arguing that. I just think we don't quite have the balance right, because you do what it takes to win. But you know, if you look at the position in reverse, as it were, India has produced a cracking seam attack, whilst at the same time, you know, universally looked at from the outside as being the home of brilliant spin. You've kind of they've built this terrific, you know, seam attack, and you know, we saw it with Siraj. What a prospect he is! You know, he must have been, you know, suddenly greatness thrust upon him in difficult circumstances in Australia, and you know, he gets into the game. He's clearly feisty. He's clearly got some attitude, which came across. You know, you've got that pace attack will stand up anywhere in the world.
No one really mentioned that Umesh Yadav and Mohammad Shami were missing for the entire series.
Yeah, Yadav didn't play.
Bhuvneshwar Kumar wasn't fit and hasn't played a test match for a while. You know, barring injuries, Siraj won't be playing in that World Test Championship final.
That is true. It's a good problem to have for India.
Yes,
yeah,
no,
100%. The same for England. Like, you know, England could well have, you know, Mark Wood and Ollie Stone and Ollie Robinson, who's a fantastic bowler, I think. Not able to, Sam Curran, Chris Woke, some or all of those, not able to get into the side. So there are a lot of I'm firmly of the contention. I don't know if I've told you guys this, that this is a golden age of Test cricket, largely based on the fact there are some wonderful seam attacks around the world.
And if you don't want to watch Bake Off,
if you guys have followed the road safety series, Monty is at it again. Is he trying to make a comeback?
Oh, the ropes! Yes, he took a wicket against Bangladesh, didn't he? Yeah, no, he's thoroughly enjoying it from what he said to us.
Yeah,
and a maiden today as well.
Yeah, we've had Monty on the show, and I should declare an interest. I'm on the same master's course as Monty Panesar.
Wow.
I think his ambitions are very much more broadcast focused these days rather than cricket. But it's good to see some legends of bygone times getting some fun. It was fun watching Virendra Sehwag roll back the years the other day.
Yeah. Well, and
absolutely,
Tendulkar did all right with him as well. He was getting him to hurry up. I think he wanted to get to his mug of cocoa and a warm bar. Yeah.
Peterson would walk
possibly.
into this team, yeah.
It always strikes me it's a little bit unfair. Peterson and Sehwag are not that long retired, and then they're playing against guys who retired 10 years ago.
That is true. But good. I'm glad they're doing it.
Okay, guys. So moving on to the positives from the England side. The biggest positive, according to you, Tony, who would that be?
From this series, other than the
England,
fact that we lose 4-0. Let me think. It's a positive from such a difficult. You go first while I think about that one.
Yeah, Jack Leach. It wasn't, he's not an unknown quantity, and in fact, I think one of the great strengths of Jack Leach is that is his hyper consistency. But the way he's been able to, after a appallingly tough 2020, where he's had all of these health problems. That's been talked about with his flare-ups of Crohn's disease and the sepsis and the being hospitalized. He genuinely thought he might die in New Zealand at one point, and he's talked about his mental health difficulties and barely playing through 2019 and 2020. And then the way he's come back into Test cricket, bowled more overs in that first Test, I think, than he'd bowled through the entirety of 2020. And the way he's refound his game and has just become exactly the hyper consistent spinner with such control over his line and length, and tying down a good player spin like Cheteshwar Pujara, dismissed him 4 times when he'd only been dismissed I think 5 times against left arm spinners in his entire Test career before this. It was hugely impressive, and I think England have, in a curious way, everyone's talking about the paucity of the spin department. England have got their first choice spinner, and they know it, and he's done excellently.
Yeah. I'd say Lawrence possibly. I know he did a tough run at the top of the order, and they had to drop him down. But again, he's young, and I think he showed enough about his game that he can both attack and defend, and has an extremely solid technique. I'm optimistic we will see a lot more from him. And I suppose the other positive is England came roaring out the blocks and won that first Test. Jimmy's bowling was fantastic. Root was superb. Again, standout player, standout moments. So it's not without positives, just less.
Just quickly.
Completely agree with the Lawrence point of view. Probably they can, move West out of the Test squad and get Lawrence in there.
Darren Lawrence might be, it might be him instead of Ollie Pope this summer, at least for the start of it. I mean, obviously there's a bit of county cricket to go before then, but yeah, Lawrence looks extremely well organised, and whereas Ollie Pope, who is a fine player and has a lot about him, he got completely picked apart and turned inside out by Ashwin and Akshar over the course of the series.
Clueless. I was shocked Ollie Pope having zero clue how to play spin. I mean, is that just a confidence factor, or do you think it is skill?
He's been reading the Johnny Bairstow handbook, I think.
I mean, again, the curious thing, Johnny Bairstow is a really good player of spin. You look at his record in all formats. He's a dominant player of spin bowling, but it just fell apart completely for him. Ollie Pope, it reminded me a little bit of when Ricky Ponting toured in 2001. It's not always easy when someone goes to their first tour, and Ponting was a fine player, one of the greats of all time, but he didn't know where his next run was coming from against Harbhajan in that series.
Yeah. Well, Bairstow as well. I mean, poor old Johnny, he didn't. Again, there's sort of probably a negative view there of the rotation piece, because didn't he have a terrible trip to get there? So they bring him in. I know, Johnny, so you're a good player of spin, so we're going to bring him in for the night day-night pink baller, where we're expecting it to seem like crazy, but you're in for your ability to play spin, will make it really difficult for you to get there. I think that Paul had to basically hitchhike, borrow a bicycle. He basically did one of those, Ironman challenges. He probably had to swim a big chunk of it as well.
Pushing the bus up a hill.
And the poor lad has to go out in the dark and get a pair, So he didn't bat well, and there were technique issues, but there are probably some mitigating circumstances for Johnny that everyone are kind of ignoring and forgetting conveniently because it suits the narrative, as they say, to do it. But I think the poor lad was called in at a very difficult time, and basically every challenge you could chuck in his way seemed to have been done and even on the journey there. So again, some sympathy. People are saying he's done. Don't put him in a test team ever again. Don't know. I don't feel quite that strongly because I think, again, with the benefit of hindsight and a bit of retrospect, it was a big ask with just about every obstacle chucked in his way.
Yeah, I mean, he's
harder to judge.
He's obviously fallen to the back of the queue after a series like that. Although, the old joke, were you out of form? I don't know. I didn't bat long enough. Springs to mind. It was very difficult to. It's quite difficult to form a judgment on someone when they face so little.
Before we move on to the preview of the limited edition of the series, just quickly going back to the pitch debate, because a lot of the noise seemed to be coming from outside of the England camp. I didn't think that England effectively ever complained, apart from Joe Root's remark that if I can get 5 wickets, then that tells you about the pitch. I was, just going through, the previous series we had, where the first test match back in 2017, India escaped a draw at Rajkot. Had India done the same thing in Chennai first test, do you think they wouldn't have panicked and, created so much, spin turning wickets, or do you think that, it was bound to happen?
Just on the pitch, by the way, this is the first time that we've seen highly spin dominant pitches, which basically took the seamers out of the equation and also took the extra skill of India's spinners out of the equation. Pretty much since the last time they lost that home test in Pune, where Jadeja was pitching the ball outside leg stump and it was still missing off stump. Steve O'Keefe was basically getting wickets with straight balls that turned a little bit. Was essentially bowling sort of slow left arm medium, essentially, and was getting wickets like that. I don't really know what the ground staff were doing. They seem to have been asleep for 4 years. That's not the pitches that India have been winning on. India have been winning on pitches that essentially allow a little bit for the seamers and the spinners and allow run scoring to be done, and relied on the fact that they've got better players than pretty much every other
and
test
give the
team.
broadcasters value for money. I mean, any pitch has to be ultimately a contest between bat and ball.
Oh, quite. I mean, but England could have won that last test because it was. I don't want to go so far as to say lottery, but it did mean that spinners of lesser quality than Ashwin and Akshay were able to be effective. I mean, yes, I completely take the point we were talking earlier about Tony and I about the complete collective brain fade of the batting of both sides, which didn't help. If the ground staff were producing those pitches thinking that they would help India, they've been asleep for the last 4 years. Frankly, and I think massively underestimated how good this Indian team is. I'm firmly of the belief that the only bad test pitch is a dead test pitch, but I am disappointed with how many players it took out. Both the third more than the second. I didn't think there was as much wrong with the second test pitch as people thought. Yeah, and you're right. The England didn't moan about the pitches. I thought it was interesting. I don't think India particularly do moan about pitches, but they're very keen to tell you that they don't moan about pitches, and this happens every time that the foreign media complains about pitches, which I find quite interesting. There's still a little bit, I think, from the Indian press in particular, of a team not used to winning that as much as they should be. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, there are two versions in Indian media, right? There are cricket purists who clearly say that spin pitches, home conditions, let's use them, whether they are good or bad for visitors, don't care. But then, there is a segment of it where they do know it is a bad pitch, but they make it a point to tell the media that, no, it is not a bad pitch and the other teams need to be good enough. You have to be playing a test match to test yourself, as they say.
Or the flip side is, India lost twice inside 3 days in New Zealand. and those were automatically, people were saying, "Oh, we have to play on these pitches." New Zealand pitches are flat; they have been for years. New Zealand out-bowled and out-batted India in that series. There's nothing wrong with those pitches at all. Yeah, I find the prickliness and the defensiveness of some of the. I wrote a piece basically saying that when the Indian and English media were kind of playing persecution top trumps against each other to nobody's benefit. Some of the discourse around this series was quite disappointing.
Yeah, I think the third test, the pink ball test, when you saw the foot marks on the first day, so much tent, that clearly told you this was never meant to last for beyond 3-4 days.
We'll continue playing in the same pitch for the next 5 T20s. Let's move on from Test Series to T20s. But I don't think the pitch is going to be a big factor in Ahmedabad, at least for the T20 day-nighters. So, guys, your series prediction, that's the beginning of the series prediction for the T20s. Nakul?
I think I was asked for these earlier for Guerilla Cricket, and I'm saying 3-2 England. I think that England have pretty much their first choice team available. Some talk that Jofra Archer might not be quite fit for a couple of games, but which is obviously a big loss. But I'm really excited about this T20 series. I think India got a lot closer to their first choice team. I think they've been a bit conservative with their selections recently. I fail to understand how Rishabh Pant hasn't been a fixture in the white ball setups for the last several years. It was, he wasn't in the original World Cup squad. He wasn't in the T20 squad that played in Australia. He's not been a regular in the ODI squads until recently. I found that baffling, frankly. I like the call up for Surya and Ishan Kishan. I think both of those might well leapfrog Shreyas Iyer, who does pretty much the same job as Virat Kohli, just not quite as well in terms of his slow starts and his anchoring. But obviously, Jasprit Bumrah has been rested for this series. Mohammad Shami's still not available, but Bhuvneshwar Kumar being back is a big deal. The one point that I would say with India, obviously a bit of rotation is necessary, but I'm a little bit disappointed that they've not picked Kuldeep Yadav for this series. But this England team is formidable even without Jofra Archer. I think a top seven of Jason Roy, Jos Buttler, David Malan, Johnny Bairstow, Owen Morgan, Ben Stokes, and Moeen Ali. That is scary. And that is a lot of fun to watch. And I think England have pretty much every base covered. The only thing that they've been lacking in recent years is power play wicket taking. But I think that England will just shade the series 3-2, and I think it'll be a cracker.
Yeah, next 2 months is full of T20s, isn't it? The final match series and IPL. Feast for the cricket lovers.
Feast for T20 lovers.
Yeah, T20 lovers.
Well, I'm gonna take the last time you asked me for a prediction, I got it horribly wrong. So I'm going to start by saying I don't think there'll be any draws. So let's get that out of the equation immediately. I think I'm with Nakul in a way. I think it'll be extremely close. I've just got a feeling India will shade it 3. It's 5 they're playing, isn't it? Yeah, 3-2. England's batting is fantastic. Owen Morgan has, I think I'm right in saying, the best strike rate in international T20 cricket since 2018. It's about 162, 63, and it's going up, not down. But I'm just a little bit twitchy about the bowling attack from an England perspective. We shall see. So India to shade it, but I think it's going to be very close. I'm sure it will be extremely entertaining and great fun for us to commentate on.
I think the Indian team has got a lot of catching up to do in T20s. I hope they take this series more of trying to get their combination right rather than trying to win it. Because we know a lot of the players have already been part of the T20 setup, what they can do. But we need to test the new players out, especially try and get a 6th bowling option in. So my prediction would be India to lose 4-1 or 5-0.
Wow.
That's a big
Mr. Pessimistic.
That's a big one.
You've won. India have won 9 out of their last 10 T20 internationals in 2020.
Can I also add that I actually care literally nothing about these bilateral series. I think it's pretty pointless. So I think every team should be just using this to, warm up and, these two teams could be playing the final in Ahmedabad in 7 months' time. So this could be 5 dress rehearsals.
It's interesting that you think I think what we've seen from England is that they have been using these bilateral series we haven't seen a lot of rotation from England during series. I think now that Morgan has probably for the only time between now and the World T20 his strongest squad available, I don't think we'll see very much rotation that isn't injury enforced. I think we'll see England play pretty much their strongest 11. And I actually hope that India do the same. Rather than using it the time for experimenting is done now. You don't have a lot of time between now and the World T20. There's plenty of time for players to make a case for themselves in the IPL. But I think from this point, it's what's your best team, play your best team as much as possible. Obviously with the proviso that probably Jasprit Bumrah would walk into the Indian T20 squad and maybe Mohammad Shami potentially. And, I think Kuldeep Yadav, but the selectors seem to think otherwise. But I hope that we get two full strength 11s going up against each other for most of the series.
I think the England team needs a hypnotist. And right now they'll be telling Johnny Bairstow, it's actually Headingley, mate, don't worry. Never mind the fact it's just a little bit warmer than Yorkshire. But you're actually playing at Headingley.
You just show him the white ball. Show him the white ball.
White ball, yeah.
Johnny Bairstow is truly a world-class one-day international and T20 player. He's been phenomenal the last few years.
He opens surprises Hyderabad. So with David Warner, he had some fantastic knocks. So
he did. Although he's been dropped down the order a little bit and then out of the team because Sunrise's weird team combinations because they have too many overseas players in the same position. And it's not impossible that he could end up opening if Jason Roy. I mean, the only slight worry, Jason Roy is the only one of England's top order who hasn't had a significant score recently, but he is a potentially phenomenal player. Some talk that Alex Hales might be being reintegrated at some point over the course of this summer, which would be interesting, and Roy would be the one who's most vulnerable to that. On Tony's point about the bowling attack, I think England don't have to worry too much about the first choice bowling attack if they're going with, I guess, would be Chris Jordan, Adil Rashid, who is world-class, Jofra Archer and Mark Wood. Slightly, Tom Curran's not been particularly good for England over the last few years. Reece Topley is only making his way back into international cricket. Sam Curran is a very useful cricketer and gives you an awful lot, but I don't think England have quite got the best out of him. And Ben Stokes as a bowling option in T20 cricket is yet to be proven. It'll be interesting to see. The one thing from India that I'm interested to see is how much Hardik Pandya bowls, how much he's able to bowl, because obviously if he's able to give you a sixth option, then you're fine. If not, then you're going with those 5, which I would imagine would probably be Washington and Yuzvendra Chahal making up the spinners rather, and then Bhuvneshwar Kumar, Natarajan, and one of Chahar, Saini or Thakur to probably Deepak Chahar, and probably going with those. Not 5.
Akshar Patel?
Akshar, maybe if you want a third seamer, but I don't see India going in with. I can see that if Hardik's able to bowl, but I can't see India going in with only 2 seam bowling options.
Yeah. Hardik actually doing the hard yards in the nets, I guess, so he's going to be bowling this series.
Yeah, I'm sure that balances India brilliantly. And he was outrageous with the bat in that T20 series in Australia.
He's great. Yeah. He's the X factor for India. He can single-handedly win the games. Question, Topley, is he spin or fast bowler?
Big left-arm fast bowler.
Quickish medium ball. Gets it to move off the deck. He doesn't seem immediately, based on what we've witnessed in Ahmedabad, admittedly in a very different format of cricket, he doesn't seem to be purpose-built for those conditions, which is why I'm slightly twitchy. I have the same worry about Mark Wood. It's why I'm slightly nervous about the bowling attack. But, I mean, Dawid Malan, I'm fascinated to see how well he goes, because he's got himself an IPL slot this year, hasn't he? It'll be really interesting to watch him. He's far and away top T20, batsman in the world at the moment.
Yeah,
heavy weight of expectation on his shoulders, but he keeps coming good for England. It'll be really, really interesting to see how he goes. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, flies under the radar, doesn't he? Flies under the radar, David Malan.
Well, a little bit. I mean, the classic Dawid Malan innings is him being 15 off 15 and then scoring a sort of 50 ball 80, or a sort of or something like that, or a 70-ball 100. Sort of like, Shreyas Iyer actually was quite good in that T20 series, but there's some of the same issues with the slow start. But England have enough power that they can, on the rare occasions, and it has been very rare for England that Milan hasn't been able to kick on, they can compensate for it. And when Milan does kick on, he's very difficult to stop once he gets going, off pace or spin. So yeah, he's been phenomenally consistent for England in the last few years. On the conditions point, I think it's probably fair to say that we'll see flatter pitches and in this for the T20 series than we saw for the Test series. More sort of traditional T20 pitches, and maybe they'll tire a little bit and take spin more. But Ahmedabad has a lot of strips, even for the, I think
15,
there's 11 different.
11.
It's double figures,
11,
yeah. Anyway, it's a lot. There's three or four strips potentially that can rotate between the. I don't imagine they'll tire out too much in a week. So Reece Topley is a very good Yorker. He's very tall. He's got a sharp bouncer. The worry with him has been he's a big man and he's been very injury prone. But I'm a fan of his, and I like to. Whether he'll get a game or not is an interesting question, because Wood and Archer were superb in tandem during the home summer.
Yep. Archer.
I would actually like to see Livingstone get a game. He seems to be a good talent, but not getting enough games out there.
Yeah, Livingston and Sam Billings. It's not bad to have in reserve. I was thinking Sam Billings, since the start of 2018, has the lowest dot ball percentage of any batter in all T20 cricket against spin. He's got this really incredible range of stroke. You can hit the ball almost anywhere. And yeah, Livingston had a very good BBL, didn't he? But yeah, I think they're there probably in case of an injury or loss of form. But I don't quite see them as first choice yet. But it's a good problem to have, having good players who can't get into the team, and that's certainly what England have got. The fact that they can seriously say that Alex Hales is not good enough to warrant special treatment. Very few other sides in the world could even say that credibly.
Yeah. Akash, real quick, your prediction. I'm going 3-2 England. What about you?
Same here. I'm going to go with Nakul and you. 3-2 for England for T20 series.
Okay, should be fun. Excellent.
Yeah.
Right. Now we got a little quiz, Tony and Nakul. 4 questions, 2 each. Easy ones for Tony, difficult ones for Nakul.
Well, that's set me up to fail even worse. It just made
Tony, you go first. So since 2007, India and England Test series have been named Pataudi Trophy after the legendary Nawab Pataudi. What is the equivalent name of this series when England play in India? And this is not Paytm or whatever trophy. This is something specific we're looking for.
De Mello?
Absolutely right. That is Anthony De Mello Trophy.
Anthony De Mello. And is named after an administrator, not a Jesuit priest, because in my preparation for the series, I figured that out and I wrote down, and I made loads of notes about this guy who was a Jesuit priest. I thought that really doesn't sound like particularly appetite for India. And I was literally about to go on air and talk about this bloke. I thought I better go and double check that. And that's when I realised, just at the last minute, it was a different Anthony De Mello, namesake of mine, of course, but he spells it wrong. He's got an extra H. He's got an H in his name, which he shouldn't have.
Most of the Indian Anthonys have that extra H. Well done. Fantastic. Next one. Nakul, this is for you. Joe Root became the 9th batsman to score 100 in his 100th test. In fact, he's the only batsman to get a double 100 in his 100th test. Name the other 2 Englishmen to have achieved this feat.
I mean, this obviously came up at the time, but so much has passed under the bridge that it's very difficult to remember. I seem to remember one of them is Geoffrey Boycott.
No, I can give you clues. One of them has a famous speech or a lecture at Lord's every year.
Colin Cowdrey.
Yes, and one more I'm looking at.
Graham Gooch?
No, wicketkeeper.
Alex Stewart?
Yeah, too many clues, but yeah, that's right. Colin Cowdrey. Someone told me we need to have really tough questions because Nakul gets everything, so I'm happy.
Actually, remember that was an interesting one.
Next one, Tony.
Oh,
Who? This is for the current series. Who had the best bowling strike rate for England? Now, this could be even 1 wicket anyone has taken. So I'm looking for the best bowling strike rate for England in the Test series.
was that a clue? The 1 wicket. You're trying to help me out here, poor old chap. It's getting late. He hasn't had his dinner. Let's try and make it easy for him. I'm just looking at the player. Let me think. The best strike rate. I mean, I'd be tempted to say Root because of that crazy spell that he
But he bowled a lot of overs. So think of someone who only played 1 test.
Ooh, only played 1 test and is a bowler. That would...
And he wouldn't have had to do too much
Would have
bowling.
been Stuart Broad because he got the "Thanks for coming, Stuart" award. Moeen Ali?
No, he had a namesake batsman, a first name.
Namesake batsman. Well, it wasn't Jofra. It wasn't Jimmy. I don't think.
Tony, I think you've been timed out.
Have I? Ollie Stone. I was trying to. Good Lord. Ollie Stone.
So surprisingly, he was the one. I actually, thought it would be Joe Root, but Joe Root ended up bowling lots of overs. So his strike rate was the best. Nakul, next one's for you. This might be an easy one. Who had the best batting average for India in the series?
I think on the strength of being left high and dry short of 100 twice, Washington Sundar.
Absolutely, the case.
God, I got that one.
And I think he also had the worst bowling strike rate, or average rather. Something like that.
It's basically batting as a sort of batter who bowls a bit, batting at number 8.
Did his dad get really upset? I read an article. His dad was really teed off by the fact he was left high and dry. Blamed everyone else for it.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because Shubman Gill's dad. You remember a few years ago where every time Kumar Sangakkara got, he had that ridiculous run in the county championship where he was scoring 100 after 100 after 100, and Kumar Sangakkara's dad kept saying should have done better. With his talent, he should have done better than Bradman. Shubman Gill is the new Kumar's dad. Like he said repeatedly, I should have the 90 he got in Brisbane should have got 100. Shouldn't have given it away.
Yeah.
Awesome. Look, on that note, Nakul and Tony, really appreciate your time. Fantastic as usual chatting with you guys. Sanjay and Akash, great having you guys back on the show. For those of you who are watching, drop us a comment and tell us what do you think of the show and your reactions to all the series preview and review. Thanks for watching, and Tony, Nakul, have a nice night, and Sanjay and Akash, we'll see you later on another edition. Thanks, everybody.
Brilliant. Don't forget to tweet us during the matches. We'll look
Don't
out for them.
And don't forget to listen to our coverage. The first T20 starts will be on air at about 1:20 p.m. UK time.
GuerillaCricket.com. Thanks, guys.
Correct.
Brilliant.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, chaps.
Bye.
Take care.